I cart, but he followed me. I told him I wasn't into whatever he was thinking about. I went faster and faster until I finally made it to the back storage room. He didn't follow me in. I wasn't supposed to stay back there for extended periods of time to avoid customer theft. I decided it would be best to just wait for him by the register so that he would ring his stuff up and leave. But I waited there for at least 20 minutes. He never came. I decided he was gone, and whether he stole the eggs and something else, there wasn't anything I could do. Now I had to go to the bathroom, so I took a quick jog to the back of the store and into the employee bathroom. Moments after sitting on the toilet, my heart dropped into my stomach as I heard the bathroom door open. I choked the urge to say something like, "You can't be in here," but I didn't want to give away my position. I lifted my leg so that I wouldn't be visible from under the stall, and what happened next was simply horrifying. I sat there for the longest time looking at the floor, not moving a muscle. When I finally looked up, I could see an eye peering through the crack of the stall door. I screamed. I knew I was trapped. I knew I had one shot at making a move. I grabbed the box cutter in my pocket and began sliding it through the crack of the door, forcing him to move his eye away. I took that chance to slam the stall door open in his face and hi-yay it out of the bathroom and all the way out of the store. I called my boss at least 5 times before he finally picked up and explained everything. He told me to call the cops, and so I did. Of course, the man wasn't in the store anymore by the time the cops showed up. I only did the night shift twice after that, and luckily didn't see the man again. I used to work the night shift at a gas station on the side of some highway in the country from the hours of 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. The road was pretty dead. I would have maybe 1 or 2 people come in to pick cash in the whole night. It was a very boring and depressing job, especially doing the graveyard shift. But I had just finished Kala and I needed to pay off my loans. The only reason I kept this job was because my boss threw me an extra $5 an hour for doing the night shift on this one cold December night. I was doing my usual thing, reading the newspaper, playing games on my phone and whatnot, when I noticed the headlights of a car pulling off the highway into the parking lot. It was a red pickup truck. Somebody stepped out and shut the door. I went back to reading the paper as I saw that he was standing by the gas pump. I assumed he wasn't paying cash. I looked up a few moments later and saw that he was still standing in the same position, staring at the gas pump. I almost felt obligated to go out and help him. He was obviously confused. I felt a cold chill run up my spine as I saw the 6-foot-something tall man slowly turn his head to face me. I couldn't make out any features of his face, but I knew he was staring at me. I tried to pretend I didn't notice by going back to reading the paper. Of course, I wasn't really reading now. I was a bit shaken by the guy out there. I just wanted him to pay debit or credit and leave. I looked up and gasped as the man was now much closer to the front door of the building. It wouldn't have been so disturbing if it weren't for the fact that he wasn't moving. He was just standing still as before, still looking in my direction. I walked over to the door to get a closer look. All I could see in his face was still blackness. I locked the door and flipped the open sign to close down the door. I didn't care if this would possibly get me in trouble. I was not taking a chance because, quite frankly, I was scared shirtless. I walked back behind the counter and sat down on one of the containers on the floor just so I couldn't see the man outside anymore. I stayed in that position for a good 5 minutes, texting every friend I have to see who was awake. I was desperate to tell somebody about this. When I finally got up to check that he was gone, I let out a full scream as the man was now right outside the door. I picked up the phone on the counter and called the police. The operator was reluctant to send somebody over because of the way I described the situation, but I persuaded them. I hid behind the counter, boled up like a child. I began to hear heavy thumbs at the door, not innocent knocks to catch my attention. I mean thus, and thumbs trying to break down the door, and then eventually, it finally stopped. I heard the sound of a car starting outside and then driving off. I looked outside, and he was gone. A patrol cop along with the state trooper pulled into the parking lot. I reported the red pickup truck and told them which direction I thought he went in. I couldn't describe his face as all I saw was blackness. Of course, there wasn't much the police could do as the man didn't really do anything. I left that job a few months later to a job in the city. It was 2 years ago I was called in to do the night shift 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. at 7-Eleven, since somebody called out the store was located on a busy road in a rather quiet and rural area. During the night shift, you could expect anywhere from 10 to 20 people come in to buy a beer or something else. This one particular night, there was this one guy, Midwest S, that came in. He started making weird noises, like loud yelling noises I assumed had some kind of mental disability. In fact, my brother has a mental disability, so I immediately felt sympathy for the guy. He walked up to the counter without any items with his head facing me, but his eyes were looking up at the ceiling. I felt uncomfortable. I honestly didn't know how to deal with it. I tried speaking with him, but he only responded in loud noises. I kept checking if he was with someone outside, but he was alone. There weren't any cars in the parking lot, so I assumed he walked. He stood there for so long, looking up at the ceiling and making noises, that I tried to get him out by handing him a bag of chips and telling him he can go. I tried finding some kind of number to call for someone to help him. Then out of nowhere, he finally turned around and walked out of the store. I felt so horrible for the men, but at the same time I felt a bit creep out. About an hour later, the phone on the counter rang. I picked up to hear the familiar yelling sounds of the man from earlier. It caught me off guard. I didn't know what to think other than this has to be some kind of prank. I hung up on them and was now back. The person working after me came in, finally allowing for me to go home. It wasn't my problem anymore. I got home and threw all my stuff on the table, ready to get to sleep, but my phone rang within a minute. After entering the door, I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would someone be calling at 4 a.m.? I could only imagine it was bad news. I braced myself and picked up the phone to hear the man again. I felt sick to my stomach as I listened to the loud noises he made. I struggled to slam the phone to the receiver all night. I felt like I was being watched even with all the blinds shut, and I could swear I heard strange noises coming from all over my house. I refused to get any sleep until the sun came up. Weeks passed and I had forgotten about the incident until one day when going into the basement for the first time in a while. I found that papers had been scattered all over the floor, and when I went into the basement closet, I found writing on the walls. 7-Eleven had been written in Sharpie on the wall along with the address to the 7-Eleven I worked at, and my house address the most disturbing part. I also found various kitchen knives along with a large pocket knife sitting in the closet. All I can say is that man is dangerously ill. I've worked in the canine unit for 9 years and I have worked my fair share of graveyard shifts. I've definitely come across weird things at night, but I'll never forget this. One night I worked with my dog, Sammy, a German Shepherd. She was 2 years old at the time and was still kind of new to the job, just like me. I was driving down a road surrounded by crops when I spotted a suspicious-looking white van parked inside the crops. Both doors were open. I flashed my lights to try and draw out whoever was there. Nobody came out, so I parked and scanned the place out quickly. Nobody was in sight, so I took Sammy with me to track down the driver of the van. Sammy started going crazy when we reached the trunk of the van. She was pulling so hard she almost broke off the leash. I opened the trunk to the van and a blast of foul air hit me in the face. I almost passed out from the mix of the horrible smell and the pure shock of what I saw on the trunk. I counted 7 full body bags, each with a pair of feet sticking out at the bottom. I requested immediate backup with my radio. I heard the sound of a twig snapping nearby and Sammy just lost it. I lost grip of the leash and she took off into the crops. I pulled out my gun and followed the sounds of her barking, as each and every crop hit me in the face. I felt as if something would reach out and grab me. I stopped when I could no longer hear Sammy's barking, but as I stopped, the sounds of movement did not. I realized I heard movement in all directions. I had never experienced such fear in my life. I stood still as the movement around me stopped, and then out of nowhere I felt 2 arms wrap around my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't fight. I was going to die. And then I heard the sound of Sammy's bark, followed by the scream of the man choking me as Sammy bit down on his leg. The next thing I did is something that I still question if it was appropriate doing to this day. I turned around and pulled the trigger, killing the man. I grabbed Sammy by the leash and ran all the way back to the car. I could tell people were following us from behind. I managed to make it to the car safely and drive a 1/4 mile down the road. I didn't stop to see which way they went. I didn't hold my ground. I fled like a coward. I cared much more about our lives than I did this job, and I'll still say that today. But it still pains me knowing how much of a coward I was. Backup arrived shortly, but the van was gone. I even failed to get the plate number on dashcam video or even just writing it down. This was within my first few months on the force, but it made me feel like absolute shit for months to come. I, someone who was sworn to protect, let a van full of killers get away. As Sipko Spurtberger Kurdo, I work in the pro department of a home improvement company. I work the closing shift with another cashier who I'll call Nicole. Nicole is a really kind but quite timid cashier. She's also very pretty, so she has a lot of contractors hit on her. It's usually not that worrisome, though a few compliments, maybe a dinner invite, which she'd politely decline. I would probably ask her out as well if it wasn't for one detail. Nicole does have a girlfriend, so being hit on by guys on a daily basis makes her rather uncomfortable. When we first met, I told her she ought to tell those guys about being gay, but she kept saying it wasn't any of their business, so she kept that part to herself. Nicole has become my best friend, and having another cashier there with you keeps things from getting lonely. We even cover for each other's lunch breaks. One day when I came back from lunch, Nicole started telling me about this rather creepy guy who was flirting with her. She said she politely turned him down, saying she was with someone already, and while he didn't seem happy, he did leave. I shrugged it off as nothing more than the usual horny guy and laughed it off. But later that day, the man came back. Nicole wasn't there as she had left to help a customer find some lumber, so it was just me. He looked rather normal, probably handsome to most women, but he acted off after looking around the area. I asked him if I could help him with anything. "I'm here to see Nicole." He told me I asked him how he knew her, and he said he had come in earlier and asked her out, to which he said yes, so he had come back in to pick her up. I told him she had left for the day, a usual lie everyone tells to cover for their friends. His smile went away as he started looking annoyed. He said he wanted to speak to Nicole and ask her out again, which contradicted what he had just told me about accepting his previous invite. I told him he could not do that, which caused him to cross his arms and ask me why not. I'm not the best liar when it comes to making up excuses on the spot. However, I didn't want to tell him Nicole was gay if she didn't want him to know it, so I just blurted out that Nicole was my fiancée. His annoyed look went to confusion as he asked me how someone as pretty as she is could go out with someone like me. I'm not a Jason Momoa or anything, but I don't think I'm that bad looking. I told him it didn't matter and that her and I were getting married in a couple months, so he needed to back off. He gave me a death look, but didn't say anything. After an awkward silence, he left after Nicole had gotten back. I told her what went down. She asked me to describe him, and after I told her what he looked like, she said that was the same guy who came in before. She was a bit creeped out by what went down, but she found the fiancé excuse rather funny. She even stated she'd rather be engaged to me than go out with him, which I'm guessing was a compliment. A couple of weeks went by and we had all but forgotten about the man at this point. But one night after it had gotten dark, Nicole and I were getting the trash together so we could close down the registers and go home. Just then we hear a bang at the door, causing both of us to nearly jump out of our skins. It was the guy again. He had a wild look in his eyes as he kept his face pressed against the glass. "We're closed," I tell him, but he insists he needs to come in. Nicole yells again to tell him she's not interested and for him to go away and leave her alone, but he yells that he's not here for her. He's here for me. He then says that if he can, quote, take out her husband, then she'd be all his based on that he wanted to kill me. I tell Nicole to run to the manager's office and call the police, and I'll stay here and watch him. I won't lie, though I was pretty afraid to be in that tiny little area if the guy's able to get in. He wasn't the biggest guy, but he could have had a weapon on him. Plus, the store doesn't allow us to have self-defense items on us, so I was on my own here. The guy then started ramming the sliding doors like he was crazy. The doors were rattling, and I could have sworn we're going to come off its base. Just then, Nicole comes running back around the corner with a tube Yor in her hand, yelling that the cops are on their way. Finally, the man decided to leave. The closing manager met the officers when they came and he took them to review the cameras. Thankfully, the man was caught and arrested, but Nicole nor I felt safe working there any longer. We're still friends and even attend the same college together, but we do have separate jobs now while we pay our way through classes. I'm glad she was there to help me with the rogue man, as I hate to imagine what he might have done to me. Or worse, what he might have done to her. She says she's glad I was there for her, as well as having a guy around tends to make men like him less confident in what they might try. It was a wake-up call for me as to how dangerous it can be for some girls when an interested guy just doesn't want to take no for an answer.